It had been nearly 3 hours since he had made the ultimatum. At the rate Morgan rode, he was probably either over the river and in West Virginia, or so far north he was cut off from it. They hadn't received word in either case, but surely he had gone through another town and another home guard by now, and Teague had promised to help the town. He looked over to the corral fence, where a group of boys was watching the guard, and called to the nearest one. "Hey, Brighton boy." The child ran to him. "Which one are you?" "Marcus." "You can ride?" "With my eyes shut." "That won't be necessary. Round up as many boys who can ride as you can, and I mean really ride, not just these stroll around the field types. Meet me at the church, and do it quietly. I don't want them to know." He motioned to the men. "How come?" "Because if they knew what I want you to do, they wouldn't let you do it." Marcus whispered a quick, "Yes, sir," before he ran back to the corral and huddled the boys around. Teague nodded to himself as he started for the church steps out of view of the drilling grounds. These boys would ride through fire if they thought it was something that would gain their parents' disapproval. Teague hoped they wouldn't have to. About 6 boys showed up at the meeting 10 minutes later. Marcus had judged these 6 to be the best riders around. 3 of them happened to be Brighton boys. "Do any of you know what a scout is?" Teague asked them. Edward Brighton spoke up. "It's a man who goes out looking for the enemy and shoots at them from behind trees until they all give up and become his prisoners." Yes, except for the shooting and taking prisoners' parts. A scout looks for the enemy and then reports to his commander their location and number. The most important thing is he doesn't let the enemy see him." Teague let them think about his definition for a moment. "Do you want to scout for me?" Of course they did. Teague approached the home guard just after noon once the 6 boys separated to cover the road south and west of Newkirk. He stood in the middle of the field about 20 yards from the company. Only gradually did they notice him and stop marching. They stared at him for several moments, and he stared back. "Gentlemen," Teague started to yell for the benefit of those farthest from him, but his voice faltered. He remembered to draw his air from his abdomen, like a bellows, Captain Hudson had said. "Gentlemen, we've just received a wire from Athens. They report a skirmish there yesterday, but Morgan was not taken. Now mind, I am still of the opinion that all our preparation will be for naught. But if you still want me, I will honor my promise to help you." The men said nothing until someone in the back laughed. "That's more words together than I've ever heard him speak. I say we congratulate him for the effort." A few more laughed with him. "Well, he ought to know what he's doing. He marched with McClellan." The group almost held formation as they moved over to where Teague stood. Mr. Brighton stepped forward from them. "Tell us what to do, Cap." "All right, then. First of all, throw that book away. It has no practical use against cavalry unless you tried throwing it at them." The men laughed. Teague had to make a conscious effort not to congratulate himself on putting them at their ease. "Second, Mr. Brighton," he addressed the leader of the home guard directly, though his voice was loud enough for all of them to hear. "Have the men get some lunch and ask their wives to cook enough for them to carry. Some of them will be out of town for a while. Everyone will meet back here in 1 hour." Brighton turned and repeated the orders. The men merely stood still after they received them, until Teague realized what they were waiting for. He could barely keep himself from vomiting, as he yelled out, military style, "Dismissed!" Sunday, 21st September 1862. It is strange, but when I woke today, I could still feel my leg. I had to look down to assure myself Antietam Creek had not been a dream. I would have my leg, and Aubrey would come laugh at me for sleeping at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But he's not coming. God has seen fit to have me to remember what happened. If I don't write it all, I shall go mad. We were moving in formation behind Sherman's division and in front of Howard's division toward a patch of woods. I remember the dew had not yet dried, and my feet were cold where the dampness had soaked through my boots and socks. We seemed to be having very little opposition getting through the area that was supposed to be held by the Confederates. Aubrey and I were leaning against some trees while the front line cleared the woods. I was scolding him for joining the lines even though he was on the sick list. He told me the quicker this war was over, the better he'd feel, so he might as well do what he could to win it. He yawned then. Suddenly a man a few feet away fell, and part of our line started firing into Howard's line. The captain yelled for them to stop, using words no minister should. Aubrey peered into the smoke a moment, and then shouted, "That's not our third line!" Just as the words were out of his mouth, and before he could even reach for his rifle, I saw him jerk his head back and then fall forward. He didn't even go to his knees before his face hit the ground. I knew he was dead before I yelled his name. A second after Aubrey went down, I felt a burning in my leg and heard the bones shatter. I tried to get to Aubrey, but my leg wouldn't hold my weight. I fell to the ground under the great oak I had been leaning against, and felt the breath knocked out of me when my chest hit an enormous root that had grown up out of the ground. I tried to stay conscious after I hit, but I couldn't. The first coherent memory I have from after the attack is seeing Aubrey dead beside me. His face was all but gone, and his brown hair was matted with other men's blood and his own brains. The sun was setting, and its gold-red glint off his wet hair was the last thing I saw before I fainted again. I next woke during the night. It was hard for me to breathe, so I guessed I had broken some ribs. I can't put into words the pain that came from the wound in my leg, but I can only say that I feel it again as I write this. It radiates up the whole right side of my body. I looked past Aubrey to a mound of bodies. Blue, gray, and red were indistinguishable in the glare of the moonlight. Men all around me were crying for water, cursing or praying to God for death. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak above me. I focused on them and tried not to hear the moaning. My pain diminished for the while that I watched the wind move the leaves in and out of the moonbeams. Finally I saw a man come around with a lantern. I tried to move or make a sound to let him know I was still alive, but other men were on top of me. One's stomach had fallen out onto my chest. I can't stop smelling iron and bile. I fainted again before I knew whether or not the man with the lantern saw me. I woke up in the hospital tent and half my lower leg was gone. I didn't even have a say in it. I would rather have died.